Hello, World Singers. My name is Tyler.
And my name is Brooke.
And this is
Cosmere
Conversations. Welcome back, all of you lovely friends, and this is our first episode of 2025.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. We hope that you had a wonderful holiday season, and thank you so much for coming back to the podcast. The first episode of the new year, we're going to look back at 2024 because this is the State of the Sanderson breakdown.
This is an essay that Brandon writes each year to kind of give the fans an update on all of the various projects, what hasn't been done in the past year, and what is anticipated to be done in the upcoming years. And it's gotten quite long in the last few years. So if you are either new to the fandom, maybe have never heard of the State of the Sanderson, or you missed it in all of the holiday kerfuffle and could not be bothered to read this long essay, we've got a little recap for you.
And we're going to dive right into it. But first, before we go exploring someone else's house, we need to explore our own house. We need to kind of clean up, make some announcements, and get us ready for 2025 because there's a lot of exciting stuff happening. But I want to start us off with this episode, and maybe the next couple of episodes are going to be Wind and Truth spoiler free.
Yeah, it'll be very obvious when the Wind and Truth spoilers begin. Never fear.
And that is not right now. So
Correct.
There are no Wind and Truth announcements or anything that we are going to be hinting at in this episode regarding Wind and Truth. And when it happens, we will make it explicitly clear. So feel free, wherever you are on your Wind and Truth journey, you are safe here.
Coming up in the next months, I think, we are going to be interspersing some interviews and guest episodes into our Wind and Truth episode series. So we've got kind of two branches of new episode series that will be coming at you in the next few months. Very excited to start both of these.
Yeah, the conversations are expanding. This is something that we have been playing with for a while. We've had a couple of guests on the podcast over the years, but this is going to be a little bit more dedicated and purposeful. And so there's going to be a series of episodes that have guests, and those topics will be announced in the future. You know, no spoilers for what is upcoming, but there will also be the Wind and Truth episodes, probably extending well into 2026. That's right. A full year
probably
worth of Wind and Truth stuff coming your way. But we wanted to also introduce these interview or conversation with guests.
Yeah, and have more people join the conversation, get some more perspective, some more speculations, some more people to push back on Tyler's insane theories.
It is taking an army. Every time I'm more correct, my energy gets intense and intensified.
I don't know when you're correct, but okay.
I think the point is that we will have more people to point and laugh at me for all of my incorrect ramblings. And that's going to be happening over the next couple of months. But it presents a interesting dichotomy because this is how we are imagining it working throughout 2025. The Patreon is going to act as the first source for these interview episodes. And so they are going to be Patreon exclusive for a window of time before they release to the public. And so if you're interested in getting some of those interviews before the general audience, that's where the Patreon episodes are going to really come in handy.
Our patrons also have some other benefits, like we will check in with them first when we ask for episode topic suggestions or questions to pose to our guests, things like that, a little bit more participatory. So if you're interested in being involved in that kind of way, you can check out Patreon.
Yeah, and the Patreon has a Discord. More and more people joining all the time. Claims, saw you over there recently, give you a shout out. I think that is going to be really fun over the next year. But guest episodes are also inspired by our patrons. Again, we cannot spoil anything that's upcoming, but one of the big guests that we were interested in came right from our patron suggestion. So you too can follow us over there on Patreon and get some exclusive stuff. The bonus episodes in the future are going to be more true bonuses or silly bonuses. They're going to be extra episodes that are fitting outside the realm of what we are releasing publicly, and they will likely remain exclusive rather than the interview episodes, which are always intended to get to the main feed and are just a little early on. So that's what's going on over on Patreon. And then, Brooke, can we bookend? Can we bring forth a bit of the podcast past and remind all of the listeners, because we know we might have some new people joining in after Dragonsteel Nexus, joining in after Wind and Truth, looking for a home where you can find some friends. And we want to tell you what the podcast is all about.
Welcome first to any new listeners. I think that there are a lot of new Sanderson fans coming in, which is very exciting. The algorithm has found out that I'm a Sanderson fan because now my entire threads feed is just people who are like, I'm starting my Brandon Sanderson read. So my eyeballs are just filled with all of y'all new fans. Welcome. We love having you here. Our goal, our purpose with this podcast, one is to be open and accessible to all Cosmere fans. We don't want you to feel like you don't belong here if you haven't read every single word of Brandon and have memorized every article on the Coppermind. We don't either.
We make a resource for those types of things. And that's probably what I think is most important for the accessibility, because there's a high barrier to entry. We ruin basically 25 books worth in the first episode and kind of spoil things up front. So we recognize that this is a huge investment to get into the podcast.
Yeah, there's a lot of books to read, and then there's a lot of additional content, like I was just referencing with Words of Brandon and the Coppermind, and there's all kinds of sort of intricacies to our beautiful fandom that can feel kind of intimidating when one first dips a toe in. And so this is sort of intended to be a resource for everyone that both existing fans who love to speculate will enjoy, as well as people who are new. I know for me, one of my sort of driving forces in starting to create the podcast way back 7 years ago when we started was like, I wanted to have an auditory version of the Coppermind, sort of, that I could, listen to while I was commuting or at work or something like that. Like, I don't necessarily always have time to just be reading articles on the Coppermind to like boost my Cosmere knowledge. But I do have a lot more time to listen to podcasts. So that was kind of the goal. And I think we've done a pretty good job with that, and with kind of balancing. Maybe it's like an audio mashup of both the Coppermind and the 17th Shard, since we also put like speculation and kind of wild theorizing in here as well.
Exactly. A beautiful matchup, and I like that. Bringing a little bit of the truth, but also some of the speculative wind, one could say. And I think that going forward, we just want to double down on that structure as we are working throughout 2025 and going into years in the future. We want these episodes to be a resource that can be returned to, like a book at the library that you're welcome to check out at any time. Episode 53. I don't even know what that is, but it's there on the shelf, and you can pick up episode 53 or any of our episodes.
I mean, obviously things will be like dated or not have all of the information at some point as we continue on into the future. But I think that kind of explains some of our ethos around our upcoming series, like why we're going to spend 2 whole years kind of taking our time to parse out everything that happened in Wind and Truth. We're not really rushing or trying to get everything out right now, in the sort of algorithm content creation grind sense.
I suppose we're actually doing the opposite of what the algorithm would like, because the algorithm wants new information every single day, and we should be posting. Exactly. It's Wind and Truth season.
We should have been posting things, right when Wind and Truth came out, we should have like never slept and read the whole book in 2 days.
According to the algorithm,
Yeah.
but not according to us, because for us, we're trying to have a good time, a fun time, and a low stress time. There's plenty of stress in doing any type of work that one doesn't need to do. But I think that when we have that mindset of creating a resource that's going to be something people can return to, something we can return to in the future, that's really what keeps us motivated. And the gift of time is probably our greatest benefit. You and I have time to create this podcast, and so we're going to take that time and really do it justice in terms of what works for us, and we hope that it works for you. We know that someone who's a fan right now might want 50 episodes about Wind and Truth, but the person in the future, the far future, is going to be thankful that we took our time and developed not only the resource and lore episodes, but also hopefully these new conversation and interview episodes as well. I want them to stand out and not just be like, quick, give me your instant reaction to the latest book. I want them to stand the test of time. And that's what we're going for here on the podcast. And I think the very last thing, at least for me, it has always been a joy to experience the podcast of olden days. Long before, in the time when podcasts were just people talking and other people listening and a parasocial relationship forming around whatever topic it happens to be with no ads in the middle. That's right. All of these episodes, they don't have ads. They're just available for you to listen to at any time. Now or years down the road, the core of the podcast will remain ad-free, and we supplement that with things like Patreon. That is why it's so cool when people join the Patreon and give us any amount of money over there. So thank you to everyone who has been a patron in the past. Thank you to all of those who will join in 2025 or return in 2025. You are totally awesome. Brooke, you are totally awesome. I had a lovely 2024, but let's be honest. It is Sanderson who is the most totally awesome.
Yes, let us embark upon the state of the Sanderson. Kind of a quick overview of the state of the Sanderson 2024. Obviously, he spent most of his year working on Stormlight Archive 5, Wind and Truth. Coming up next is a book called Tailored Realities, which is a non-Cosmere short fiction anthology planned to be released next year at Dragonsteel Nexus. And then sort of the plan moving forward, big picture, is that there is going to be about, he's guessing, a 6-year gap until the next Stormlight Archive novel, which was good news to me. I thought it was going to be a decade. 6 years sounds great.
Yeah, not only was it good news, it's extraordinary news. I feel like after this state of the Sanderson, I'm more amazed than ever by Brandon's timeline, his outlining, and his tenacity to continue writing. It truly is amazing. As you said, we were expecting a decade.
Yeah.
Until the next Stormlight Archive release. And I'm going to be honest, if he publishes it in 6 years, that would be no break at all. Like, I understand that technically there's a break, but when I look at all of the things that are upcoming, it's not a break. It's a fake break. He psyched us out one more time because he is producing every single year. He is giving more and more and is writing. And the concept, I mean, this is so mind-blowing, but I thought we were coming to like the end of a game or the end of a season, you know, where it's just like, we gave it our all. We went out with our rivalry game, you know, the big game at the end of the year. And now it's over. We're going to have an off season. We're going to recover. We're not going to think about our sport for a while. No, Brandon's at halftime. He's just gone into the locker room for like some quick Gatorade. And now he's preparing himself to come out in the third and fourth quarter.
Yeah, I mean, barely even halftime. It's more like a tournament weekend where he's playing like 5 games in 3 days or whatever.
Or like the chess masters who are playing 5 games at the same time simultaneously. That's what he seems to be doing.
Kind
and
of.
I thought there was going to be a break from all games. And instead he's just like, well, the big game over on the left board is now concluding, but all these other games are still ongoing. And so I don't know if 6 years is his when I want to be finished and given to the publishers for Stormlight Archive 6, or if 6 years is his expectation of the publication date.
Well, I can tell you, we have it right here in our notes.
I know.
As a matter of
I
fact.
understand what is being told to us from the state of the Sanderson, but it's unbelievable. Let's go through the kind of specific year by year breakdown of what is coming for this not break. It's a fake break.
Yeah. I want to start with like Brandon's planned writing schedule, just so we have an idea of like what he is actually going to be doing, or is at least planning to be doing in the next, 6 years. And then we'll do the release schedule, like when we can expect to actually see these things that he's working on.
That sounds great.
So starting in July of this year, 2025, he's planning to turn in his first draft of Ghostbloods 1, which is the next era of Mistborn.
That's 6 months. 6 months from now, he's turning in Ghostbloods 1. I thought he had to write all of Ghostbloods.
I mean, I think he's already started a little bit. And he also said in the State of the Sanderson that he has been planning this era of Mistborn since, I think he said 2006.
Exactly.
So
it was
it's
the
like,
main plan.
It's well outlined. He's had plenty of time to kind of go over what the main plot points are going to be, etc., which I think is, half the battle, really.
Now, it needs to be said that his plan for the Ghostblood trilogy is to have each of them turned into the publisher, his editors, and to go through the main process before any publication date, even for the first one. So he's turning in Ghostblood 1 in July of 2025. And then his plan is to turn in Ghostblood 2 February 2026.
So about 6 months later. And then mid 2026, he's planning to take a little break from writing Mistborn and write the Horneater novella, at least the first draft of that, kind of get that started. That is a novella that is about rock, and I believe it's supposed to take place between Stormlight 4 and 5, but we'll see if that holds true when it actually gets written.
Yeah, obviously between Stormlight 4 and 5 is 10 days. There is no time.
Right, yeah.
And so I'm curious if that will be adjusted. And so the detour over to Horneater isn't really a break, because by end of year 2026, he wants to be done with the Ghostbloods trilogy and have all of those books turned in to his editors for approval, which sets up a very busy and heavy Ghostbloods 2027.
Right. So by January of 2027, he is expecting Ghostbloods, all 3 rough drafts, to be ready for work, basically. Q1, Q2 of 2027, he's planning to then start work on Elantris, the Elantris sequel.
Which we think are going to be 2 sequels? Is
correct.
that right?
Yeah, there's going to be 2 and 3. And the way that Brandon works oftentimes is that he's writing one thing and revising another thing, so that he kind of has 2 different things to bop between, 2 different mindsets to switch between, kind of keeps things fresh for him. So I would guess that he's going to be, revising Ghostbloods while writing Elantris. 2, he plans to be finished with the Ghostbloods revisions by the end of 2027. 2028 will be primarily spent doing Elantris 2 revisions and writing Elantris 3. And then 2029 is revising Elantris 2 and 3 and starting work on writing Stormlight Archive 6.
And that is 4 years from now. I mean, maybe the end of 2029, but still.
Right.
4 years from now, he's planning to write Stormlight Archive 6, or at least begin that process, which would probably take all the way through 2030 and leave us with 6 years from the publication of Wind and Truth until Stormlight Archive 6. That is a truly incredible timeline.
The man's working.
Yeah, everything that you just laid out is so incredibly intensive, and most authors would be lucky to write 1 book during that period. And Brandon is planning for the publication 6 years from now of Stormlight Archive 6. Of course, these things are tentative. They might not
Yeah.
always work out this way, but I am so invigorated by Brandon's work ethic. Obviously, we talk about the Cosmere a lot. We kind of need new content in order to keep generating entertaining podcasts. But I think that there's the type of break I was expecting, which is like, I'm going to take a break and walk away from this for a while, and then I'm going to return at a later date.
I definitely overestimated how long it would take to get Ghost Bloods. But maybe we should talk about the release schedule, so we actually know when we can expect to see these things.
Right, because everything there was the writing schedule. So that's what Brandon is doing. But from the reader's perspective, we want to know when we can get them sweet.
When does it matter to us?
Exactly. So what is the release schedule? Because we actually start with a Cosmere release in 2025.
Yeah, fall of this year will be the crowdfunding fulfillment of the book Isles of the Emberdark. So it will not be available publicly to everybody, but it will start being available to people who backed the Words of Radiance leather-bound Kickstarter. Isles of the Emberdark is a follow-up to the book Sixth of the Dusk, and it also includes a storyline about one of Hoyd's apprentices. It takes place in the space age of the Cosmere and also in the cognitive realm.
Secrets, always there.
Yeah, very cool. A note from Kara from the Dragonsteel team about this book is, quote, just like the other secret projects, the book cover and interior artwork are going to be stunning. Don't let your jaw hit the floor too hard when you see them, end quote.
And Isles of the Emberdark is supposed to be delivered to the printer in mid-January.
Yeah, so in just a couple weeks, the printer will have it. So it is definitely in progress. The audiobook is also going to start recording soon and will be narrated by Jennifer Jill Araya and Kaleo Griffith.
So we can think of next year's Dragonsteel Nexus as a dual celebration. One of the Isles of the Emberdark early release, not the wide release that will happen in 2026, but also the wide release of Tailored Realities, the non-Cosmere story.
I am a little bit disappointed. I forgot that Isles of the Emberdark wasn't going to be a public release by the time of Nexus, because I was kind of hoping that there would still be a good amount of like Cosmere content at the con with Isles of the Emberdark, but that's probably not going to be the case since it won't be available to everybody.
I think it's still going to be present, but yeah, it's a little bit different than the release that we just had where the book Wind and Truth is, announced during Nexus or released broadly during Nexus. That won't be happening with a Cosmere story, but we will at least have Isles of the Emberdark out there. Of course, we will have read it, and that might be something that we are going over and kind of talking about at the same time that we would still be looking at Wind and Truth episode. So a lot of fun stuff there and like more speculation on that in the future.
If you did not back the Kickstarter campaign, you will have access to Isles of the Emberdark in early 2026. So early next year, that will come out in a regular Tor publication that anyone can purchase.
And so in spring or the summer, Q1 or Q2 of 2026, there's going to be the release of Skyward Legacy, Book 1, written by Jancy Patterson.
Which may also have a different title. He was like, Jancy might have a better name than Skyward Legacy, so it might be called something else at that point.
A placeholder title for now, but expect that in Q1 or Q2 of 2026. We're very excited about where the Skyward books go. We really liked Jancy's take on the novella and the last book in that series that was kind of co-written by her and Brandon. Right now, a rough draft is with Brandon of Book 1, whether that's called Skyward Legacy or not, but he is going over that. Jancy has a lot more revisions and editing to do on Book 1, but is also starting to plan an outline for Book 2 in that series.
And then in December of next year, 2026, we may get the release of either Dark One or Isaac's Cosmere novel. Dark One is a book that has been being written by Brandon and Dan for many years at this point. I'm going to be honest, I don't really know that much about it because it keeps being like not real.
It is a comic book right now that is available for purchase. This would be the prose version of that and expanding a lot on what was touched on in the comic book Dark One. That would be at best December 2026. And again, there could be a soft coordination for a Nexus release if all things go according to this plan.
Yeah, it seems like they are at least trying to get something out every year. So either 2026 or 2027 is going to be one of these two things, hopefully. Dark One is that book by Brandon and Dan. Isaac's Cosmere novel, Boatload of Mummies, now unfortunately has a real title, which is Book of Nails.
The Book of Nails, spelled like the Carpenter's tool and not nail from Stormlight Archive. But if he is also writing a Book of Nail, I'm down for that as well. I think that Boatload of Mummies is, of course, the better title, and I'm petitioning. I'm beginning the petition. It's just me and Brooke, maybe. Like, I haven't convinced her yet, but I am standing out
I
in the
definitely
street
want
corner.
it to be Boatload of Mummies.
Yeah, I'll see you all at your local grocery store. Just will you sign the petition to
rename?
To keep the name, not even renaming. It's been renamed, unfortunately. But this is supposed to involve everybody's favorite, Nikki Savage from Scadrial Era 2.
Yeah, this story is set on Scadrial. It follows the adventures of Nikki Savage. She's a character in the broadsheets, but this novel will be events as they actually happened rather than the sort of sensational serialized story that gets published in the broadsheets.
And then we have all of 2028 that is likely going into the publication and the events around the publication of Ghost Blood's Book 1.
Yes.
And that release is most likely going to coincide with Dragonsteel Nexus in December. So that is probably the earliest that I can imagine based on the writing schedule and the release schedule. We're talking about December 2028 for a true return back to one of the main Cosmere planets in Scadrial. I think...
So we've got 3 years.
That's nothing.
Exactly. Like, that's so much better than I thought. I was thinking it was going to be 5, 6, 7 years to get anything.
Ghost Bloods. Exactly. Yeah. That's what I was afraid of. Like, maybe we would get Isles of the Emberdark. Maybe we would get something like the Horneater novella or something short, is what I was expecting and planning on. And this is so much better. So I'm actually really excited about the potential that we could be going to another Cosmere ball, Dragonsteel Nexus 2028, but this time it's a Scadrian ball.
Yeah.
Get hyped for it already, folks.
Is it going to be a classic Scadrian ball or is it going to be a 1980s Scadrian ball?
I actually love every possible generation of Scadrian balls, so you can have the classic ball gown era. That would be Vin's era.
Yeah.
Or you can have
like a
Victorian era and the cowboy inspired leather dusters of era 2, and then the 1980s big hair,
poofs, ribbons, ruffles. Give me a powder blue tux.
And just Michael Jackson-esque dancing and singing going on. I really am actually more excited about that now than I realized. And so thank you to myself for implanting that idea and that imagery. And I'm really hopeful for a 2028 that we get to dance and celebrate with all y'all.
The description that Brandon gave of Ghost Bloods is, quote, "This series will mark the return of some familiar, somewhat spike-filled characters from Era 1, along with some new characters. It will follow, as the title indicates, the Ghost Bloods and their activities on Scadrial some 50 years or so after the end of Era 2, end quote.
I think we could offer some fun speculation about what Ghost Bloods is going to entail, but let's save that for in the future, because there's so much wrapped up in this series. As you said, Brandon has been working on it, outlining it for almost a decade. And I think that's because so much turns on Ghostbloods Era 3. We had kind of like the first half, all the books that we've had previously before Wind and Truth mean one thing, are one thing, and Ghostbloods is really, just like Mistborn was, kind of like pushing us in the new direction.
It seems like, yeah, it's really going to be the sort of connecting piece between all of the events up through the end of Wind and Truth and the future stories that we've gotten in Tress and The Sunlit Man and Yumi and
Isles
Six of the Dusk and Isles of the Emberdark. So it seems to me like Ghostbloods is going to connect those things together.
And then the reason Brandon has put in such a diligent writing schedule over 2026, 2027, and 2028 is so that in 2028, with the release of Ghostbloods 1, we have every single year thereafter just a plethora of Cosmere material coming your way. So summer of 2029, that's the planned release date for Elantris 2. December of 2029, that's the planned release of Ghostbloods Book 2.
Summer of 2023 would be Elantris 3, and then December of 2030 would be Ghostbloods 3.
So that is 5 books over 2028, 2029, and 2030. 3 years, 5 major books. The Elantris sequels we've been waiting for so long. As you just said, the Mistborn Era 3, incredibly important linking series. And then again, while these things can change, the plan would be for a December 2031 release of Stormlight Archive 6. I will say it again, if he hits that schedule, it is beyond impressive. It is already so impressive of what he has done and what he has created, but this schedule that he is laying out for the next 7 years is almost more impressive. Like, it's so good. It's like the master is now at work. He's in his prime. He has all the tools, the resources, the foundation, all of the Dragonsteel stuff is all in operation and is, had a couple of years to work out the kinks. Now they are ready to be a smooth operating machine. That's what at least Brandon seems like. He's like ready to go.
Yeah, I think it just depends on kind of external factors, especially with film and television. I know that is part of what pushed like Wind and Truth and some other writing projects a bit later than anticipated, is that if those kinds of talks start to happen, they are pretty time demanding for Brandon. So if those kinds of things happen, then I think it's absolutely possible that we could see some of this start to get pushed. But it's great as a, first draft of a schedule. It gives us some hope.
It gives me a lot of hope. And someone who can give hope through stories is Hoyd. And Hoyd has some stories of his own coming.
Yeah, because everything that we just said is not even everything that Sanderson has in the works, believe it or not. Other projects include a series of picture books with revised versions of Hoyd's stories, like The Girl Who Looked Up. That is likely to be a crowdfunding campaign in 2026. I thought that this was going to be an anthology, but it sounds like it's going to be multiple individual books, which I guess is probably more appropriate to a child.
But no, I want the anthology. I want the big book at the end that he's going to release with all of them inside.
I mean, maybe. I don't know if he's going to do that.
That's not on the docket. That's what I'm saying. I want
That's
to
just
exist.
the wish list.
Yeah, put it on the wish list. I think it's going to be happening. But the first release, the first pass are going to be little children's books of Hoyd stories. So those are going to sell like hotcakes. And we also have Brandon forever returning to the White Sand Project. The multiple versions that have existed in the past are not enough for Brandon. He wants an official White Sand prose version of that story on Taldane. It is an important one. It does introduce characters that are vital, like Chris and Naz, but there's also an important aspect of Taldane and autonomy that needs to be told to understand the broader Cosmere. And I think this is something he keeps wanting to return to because he's been unhappy with the way that the graphic novels played out.
Yeah, and just he's realizing more and more how important the story is and like really needing to get a solid version out there. He did say that he's going to try to keep the prose version pretty close to what is in the graphic novel. He said, quote, "It will add a little more depth to things, but it will basically be the story from the graphic novel. Both will remain canon, therefore, and I'd like for you to be able to experience the story via either format as you prefer."
I think this could be similar to how when it comes to movies or TV shows, people are debating between animation and live action. Brandon is kind of having that debate internally between comic books or graphic novels and the standard prose version of the novels.
I mean, I think he recognizes that with White Sand in particular, like he's remade it so many times at this point that it is a little bit frustrating as a reader to feel like, okay, we already bought all 3 of the graphic novels and like read them, and then now you're telling me I need to buy this new book. You know, if it was a quite different story, I think that might feel a little annoying or exploitative as a reader. So I think he's really keeping that in mind as well, and just trying to keep in mind that keeping it closer to what's already been said is going to be better and easier for everyone.
So that can always be a new announcement in the future. The one that I think has gotten pushed furthest, unfortunately, is the Warbreaker sequel, tentatively titled Nightblood. This has been asked about basically since Warbreaker was released, and we've wanted it, you've wanted it, everybody's wanted it. Guess what? You're not getting it.
No.
It is likely, I think 2 things have happened. 1, he's got a full schedule, as we just went over. And 2, the plans that he has for Warbreaker 2 have probably become more important to the future of the Cosmere. And I think he wants some of the aspects of the surrounding story to be in place before he returns to Nalthis and the Warbreaker world. Again, there's no spoilers for Wind and Truth or what's going on with Nightblood, but we know that he is a sword that has already crossed into other worlds and had significant impact on Rashar. I think that before Nightblood's full story is told, there need to be new sets built around him to play in, or new things that are going on that we don't have the information about. And so I think Warbreakers just got pushed further and further until those things manifest.
In addition to Warbreaker, there are a handful of other Cosmere books that Brandon has at one time or another sort of mused that he would love to write, or that are, you know, on the sort of dream list of like things he might one day write. Those books include The Night Brigade, Dragonsteel, The Silence Divine, The Grand Apparatus, Mythos, the Aetherworld book series, something called Freefall 7-Layer Burrito World, and an unnamed other Ashen book. I've never heard of this Burrito World, but I'm intrigued.
Oh, Burrito World, I think, is from writing excuses or intentionally blank Brandon's podcast. And I think that's an in-joke that has now become a slightly bigger joke, or a joke to a wider audience. And is that the title that it will stick with? No, unfortunately not. But just like Boatload of Mummies, I'm out there on the streets with my petition to keep Freefall 7-Layer Burrito World as the appropriate title for whatever this book happens to be.
If we need some additional context on some of these books, let's just give like a 1-sentence explanation for anyone who maybe doesn't know or doesn't remember what some of these side projects are. The Night Brigade would be about the Night Brigade from the Sunlit Man.
Dragonsteel is the planned last series in Brandon's Cosmere collection, and it is supposed to tell the distant past as well as taking place in the far future.
Hoyd's backstory, I believe, will be in that. And then The Silence Divine is a book about Ashen.
The Grand Apparatus was a spoiler that Brandon dropped in Dragonsteel Nexus 2023 speech, hinting at a perhaps multi-planetary apparatus. We don't even know.
Nobody knows.
It's so much speculation, but we love it.
It is something in sort of relationship to Canticle as well from the Sunlit Man. And then Mythos is also just a random planet name that was dropped at some point and was like, oh yeah, that's a world. Maybe I'll tell you that story someday.
Yeah, I have a feeling that this could be involving the Shard of Valor, just because I so associate the mythos, like the Greek and Roman mythos, with valor.
The concept of valor. Yeah.
So that was my only concept, but again, no true information about that series. The Aether World book series is kind of set up in the Lost Metal, but we also have a little bit of Aether play over on Lumar in Tress's book. There is a non-canon book called Aether of Night. It was one of Brandon's very early projects. You can read it. It is available, but it is not considered to be what the Aethers are now or what they're becoming. But this would kind of be that story and the inspiration for the magic done proper in the Cosmere. That's how I imagine this potential book series.
In addition to those, we have Dan's work. He is working on a Cosmere series as well. And this is what he had to say in the State of the Sanderson. Quote, "Yes, I am working on a new series set in the Cosmere. No, it isn't about Threnody. Yes, I will inevitably write something about the Night Brigade. No, I can't tell you when any of this comes out. Yes, we are also working on non-Cosmere projects. No, I won't tell you about any of those either. Yes, they are awesome." End quote.
Thanks so much, Dan. He's given us nothing but speculation and tugged at our heartstrings, but that's a lot of content. That's content on top of the content. And so I consider almost all of those to be bonuses. If those things start dropping here in the next 5 years, I will be nothing but overjoyed to consume them. But I'm thinking these are all long-term plans.
Yeah, I would say all of these are like 20 to 30 years.
Who knows? There could be another global pandemic and boom shakalaka, Brandon secret projects his way into our hearts and drops everything. But let's not hope for that particularly. Let's instead look at how the people are spending their hard-earned dollars on crowdfunding, because 2024...
A lot of our hard-earned dollars.
2024, 2023, big crowdfunding years, and there's more to come, but not so much in 2025.
Yeah, this year they have no crowdfunding campaigns planned, which honestly, I am pretty glad to hear. This was a big year for spending money on the Cosmere. So we can all plan to give our wallets a little bit of a break this year. There is a potential board game planned.
Yeah, exactly. It's, we're going to give our wallets a potential break in 2025. And then they're like, board games, RPGs, more things for you to spend your money on. And I'm like, yes, please. No breaks in my wallet. I want my wallet to be living trim and tight, keeping it, no savings whatsoever. I want to just be barely there hanging on because yes, there's supposed to be a potential board game with Brotherwise Games, which has partnered and done multiple things now within the Cosmere universe.
I think this would come out at the earliest in 2026. So there is still some time buffer there. I didn't know that this was even something that was on the table, really. And what he said was, quote, "When we do the big, guys, this is a complicated one, board game with Brotherwise, that will be a crowdfunding campaign," end quote.
Plenty to speculate about here, but instead I just want to turn to the Cosmere RPG, because that's also being done by Brotherwise Game. The Stormlight series, or the Stormlight stories, I don't know exactly how they're referring to them.
Setting.
Yeah, the setting is releasing in 2025. There are already introductory campaigns that are being played by people all out there across the world, and people are starting to homebrew and make up their own rules. But for the official stuff, the Stormlight setting world guides and handbook, as well as the adventure books, are all going to the printer or at the printer now. The expectation and what everything is on track for is a release of the Cosmere RPG Stormlight setting in September of 2025. The next setting that they are already working on is the Mistborn setting. Theoretically, these things should get easier to do over time because you are not introducing a rule set, You are only introducing new features, new traits, and new ways to play within a rule set for the RPG.
Yeah, I think the Mistborn setting is scheduled for late 2026, so about a year after the Stormlight setting is available. I also believe that digital versions of the handbook and the world guide, etc., will be available soon, like early this year. It's just the physical products that will not be available until later, I think is what I read.
Over on the Discord, I think there was some hope for early in the year, like the first day of Q2. So like April 1st is what people were hoping. It's probably more likely going to be the end of Q2 or very early in Q3. So
Okay,
I would
so
say
like summer.
I would say summer.
Yeah.
Summer
Okay.
is when you're going to get the digital versions of the world guide, the handbook, adventure stories, everything to set you up. And then the hard copies will be available in September. So I would say we're working hard in the background, trying to get ready for some Stormlight RPG, and 2025 could be a big RPG year. I'm excited about it, but we can't devote too much mental content to it because we don't have it in hand yet. And that's what I need most of all.
Unfortunately, yeah. And then, of course, there are other projects for the Cosmere in television and movies. There were talks for a while about doing The Emperor's Soul as a movie.
I think this is the first I've heard about this.
Yeah, this was the first I'd heard about it in the State of the Sanderson as well, which was quite exciting. Unfortunately, those talks did not go anywhere, but I think that would be a great feature film.
So often I say that The Emperor's Soul is the greatest beginning spot for someone who has never read anything in the Cosmere. I think the same is true about a movie. I think you could do a wonderful movie.
It stands alone so well. The magic system is really compelling. The characters are compelling. The story is compelling. It could be very interesting in terms of design.
And it just fits in a movie timeline
exactly.
so perfectly. I think the 2-hour structure is great for The Emperor's Soul, and it always becomes questionable when you're talking about the Mistborns or the Stormlight Archives. Like, oh, would those be better as the HBO style 10-episode seasons over many years? That's the debate. I think there is no debate when it comes to The Emperor's Soul. It's a perfect movie, and I would love to see that as an example of, you know, a studio, a production company, all of the different aspects of a film, working with Brandon and Dragonsteel and making something happen. But that's now not even the one that I'm most excited about, because that one's seemingly come and gone in the night. I didn't even know that it was there. Now I want it, but it's not there. And yet there are some ones that have some potential still.
Yeah, one exciting thing is that Skyward has been optioned for TV and is currently looking for a showrunner. Now, that still means that it's quite a long way from actually being made. Mm-hmm. In fact, the bulk, I would say, of this year's State of the Sanderson was spent explaining the production and kind of pre-production process for TV and movies. And it sounds exciting at first to hear like, oh, Skyward's been optioned for TV. But that is actually step one. And it's basically just the people saying like, maybe we'll make this. We will reserve it for some period of time, see if we can get anyone to work on it, like see if we can get all of the pieces together, basically. And there's still a lot of time for them to decide, actually the pieces didn't fall together, or space things aren't popular right now, and like actually we're not going to make that at all. So kind of exciting news, but still very early days.
Exactly. Very early days. Brandon's works have been optioned in the past and nothing has come of them. A lot of authors' works are optioned, and that really doesn't mean that things are moving forward or should be planned on or expected anytime soon. But I think, just like we were saying about The Emperor's Soul, the Skyward series represents something that can be self-contained, can be really fun to see get off the ground, and And my understanding is that it would present a good opportunity for the studio to show me that they are capable. Like, I know Brandon is capable. I know I'm capable of spending money on these things, but I have yet to see the studio that is capable of putting something together. And that's really what I want from these different early movie and TV options. So we have the Skyward, but probably the one that you and I are most excited about is the potential of an animated TV show for Tress of the Emerald Sea.
Brandon kind of teased this last year in the State of the Sanderson, and the update is that there might be an offer to option it coming soon. So we're still at step like -1. But the idea is out there. They've been pitching the idea, and maybe that's another thing that will maybe happen.
I would love to see Tress of the Emerald Sea. And I think that animation is a lot of people's preferred way of imagining the Stormlight Archive or just the Cosmere stories in general. It's not necessarily my preferred way of seeing those things play out, but I would love to kind of be shown how well an animated story could exist, especially, I mean, we've talked about so many different TV shows from Avatar: The Last Airbender, Dragon Prince, Arcane from the League of Legends. Like, all of these things are kind of demonstrating the power of animation and the way that a group of animators can really bring a story to life. I think Tress would really work well in an animated setting. It's fun, it's pirate themed, and you have these spore oceans that it would just be incredible to see brought to not life, but animated life.
Yeah. And then, of course, lastly, the Mistborn movie. This is still a no-go for the moment. The previous attempt failed because the studio did not want to do it the same way that the producers wanted to do it. So these projects always have so many different parties and people that have to come together to make these things, and we see the end product, and most of us don't sit around and read the credits that can go on for 10 to 15 minutes. There are a lot of different people and different skill sets and equipment that have to go into these projects, and if people are not on the same page, they don't happen. Unfortunately, as Brandon said, quote, "Alas, it did not happen." Yes, this means that stars were attached. No, Henry Cavill was not one of them. Yes, you'd recognize some of the names. No, I can't tell them to you. End quote.
I think Brandon and Dan have been spending some time together with their yes-no answering structure, but that makes a lot of sense to me. The Mistborn series is obviously unlike those other ones. Once you get involved in the Mistborn world, you really are committed to not a single movie, but a trilogy of movies. And then there's also kind of like well, if you're going to do Mistborn, what's the plan for Stormlight? Immediately. The second that
I don't know about that.
I think that it's just like, it's all kind of wrapped up with the bigger series that Brandon has. Once there is a hook in, it starts to spiral out, because then you're not just adapting the Mistborn trilogy, you're adapting the Cosmere.
I mean, Mistborn stands alone really well.
It does.
I don't
It
think
stands
that there would be
great.
any necessity to go further than Mistborn.
I'm not saying that there is the necessity, but there's an implied weight and there's an implied seriousness that I think Brandon is taking very seriously. And if he can't get the studio and the production company and his Dragonsteel team like all on the same page, then it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the difference that I'm seeing compared to something like back in the day. He gives the rights for a comic book to be done for White Sand. He might be giving the option or rights for The Emperor's Soul or Tress or Skyward series a little bit more freely or liberally, allowed to take more chances on those series. But I think when it comes to Mistborn, and certainly when it comes to Stormlight Archive, Brandon's not messing around. He's like, nope, this is go time. This is the category A most important thing. You got to get it right when you're doing Mistborn.
I think he does. He wants to get something made, and I think he is looking for the right thing, basically, to like prove to the motion picture industry that this is something that people would be interested in, that would make good television or movies, you know. And so it's just about like what is the in. He needs a calling card that he can point to and say, look, we made the Emperor's Soul movie and it did great, or we made the Tress animated TV show and it did great. Because once something does well, it's so much easier to pitch even other studios, other production companies on other things and get other things made.
Yeah, I think that that's going to be what is most important is you get an early win. You can't strike out on Mistborn or then a bunch of other things fall apart. Look at the Aragorn series, which had a whole trilogy of book, now is something that Christopher Paolini has returned to, and he has even more books in that series. But there was so much bad faith attached to a failed movie that it really like derailed that. And there might be something going on with TV in the future for that series. Very exciting for that possibility. It can literally impede the development for years of another movie, and that would be incredibly devastating if it was happening with Mistborn, when it was just like, hey, we took a shot with $250 million as an example, and it didn't work out. Therefore, we will never go back to Brandon Sanderson again.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
That is something that I don't think Brandon wants to happen. And that's why it makes sense that he's going for hopefully one of these easier wins with the other series. So I think there is a bunch of things to be excited about from this State of the Sanderson, a lot going on in the future, maybe not releases every year, but then the back half of the 20s is going to be absolutely on fire with Cosmere content.
Honestly, we're going to have enough to talk about now between Wind and Truth and then Isles of the Emberdark.
I'm feeling good about it. Like it's looking good for us. We hope that it's looking good for you as well. Brooke, is there a specific thing that you are most excited about hearing from the State of the Sanderson?
I am always most excited for the anticipated release schedule because I just want to know when I'm going to get more books.
Okay. And you know.
And yeah, and I was pleased. I was quite happy to see the projected timeline, knowing, of course, that these things are very subject to change and, in fact, usually do year to year. But it still feels good to start out from a much better place than I was expecting.
Listener, let us know what is your favorite thing or new bit of information learned from the State of the Sanderson. What are you excited about going into 2025? We hope that you will join us for all of our Wind and Truth content, as well as some of the exciting interviews we have coming up in the new year. It's going to be a fun one. There is maybe not a major Cosmere novel, but there is so much to go over. We are ecstatic to be talking Wind and Truth, and the speculations have already begun in our household.
Oh, yes.
We're going to bring you all in for the journey throughout 2025, and we hope we can deliver a lot of those resource episodes, just the books up on the library shelf for years to come that you might be writing along with us as they are being produced, or you might be a person who is far in the future coming back.
Hello, future human.
Exactly. I love that part of it. Is just there's somebody from 2040 maybe who is listening to this episode for the first time and just finished Wind and Truth in their own life in 2040 and is now looking for a place to have a bunch of episodes and a bunch of speculation, and it's just there for you. I don't even know what we've created, but you do know what we've created, and you can see it ahead, and that is a truly miraculous thing about making all of these episodes. So Brooke, thank you so much for a fantastic 2024, and I am incredibly excited to be your podcast partner going into this next year and all the years to come. Can you take us away?
Until next time, life before death,
strength before weakness,
journey before destination.